dare you!" Max pointed a finger at Ben. Ben shivered, pulling his jacket tighter. It was a chilly autumn evening, the wind whistling through the trees like a ghostly moan. They stood before the abandoned Crestwood Asylum. Its imposing silhouette loomed against the twilight sky. The old building whispered with forgotten stories, stories of sadness, fear, and madness.
Scared, Ben?
Erin smirked, her breath misting in the cold air. Ben swallowed, his heart pounding like a drum solo. He couldn't back down now, not in front of them.
No way. Let's do it.
He took a shaky breath and followed Max and Erin toward the asylum's rusted gates. The iron gates groaned as they pushed them open. The air inside the asylum felt heavy, thick with an eerie silence that pressed against their ears. The only light came from the sliver of a moon peeking through the grimy windows. They tiptoed down a long, dark corridor. The floorboards creaked under their feet, each sound echoing in the stillness. Dust swirled in the pale moonlight, dancing like tiny ghosts.
This place is creepy.
Ben nodded, his eyes darting from shadow to shadow. Max, pretending to be brave, shined his flashlight down the hallway. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling like macabre decorations. The air smelled stale, like old medicine and forgotten memories. A sign, barely visible in the dim light, read Ward C, restricted. Max's eyebrows shot up.
Restricted? That sounds promising.
He grinned, a mischievous glint in his eyes. Ben's stomach lurched. He didn't like the sound of this.
Maybe we should turn back.
He suggested, but his voice lacked conviction. Erin shook her head.
Don't be such a chicken, Ben.
She pushed open the heavy door to Ward C. The hinges groaned in protest, sending shivers down their spines. Ward C was a long, narrow room lined with padded cells. The cells were empty, but Ben could almost hear the echoes of tormented souls. The air felt colder here, and the silence was even more profound. They moved slowly down the hallway, shining their flashlights into each cell. The padded walls were ripped and torn, and strange markings covered the walls.
Someone scratched these.
Erin whispered, pointing to the wall with a trembling finger. Suddenly, they heard a noise. A soft whisper, barely audible, seemed to come from the end of the hallway.
Did you hear that?
Ben's voice was a strained whisper. Max, his face pale in the flashlight beam, nodded slowly.
What was that?
They listened intently, their hearts pounding in their chests. The whisper came again, this time a little louder. It sounded like someone was saying, "Get out!" Just as suddenly, the whispering stopped. The silence seemed to press down on them, suffocating them with its intensity. They stood frozen, their flashlights trembling in their hands. Then they saw it. At the very end of the hallway, a figure materialized in the shadows. It was tall and gaunt, its form shifting and flickering in the dim light. They couldn't make out its face, but they could see its eyes. Two glowing red eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness, staring directly at them. A scream caught in Ben's throat. He turned and ran, his fear lending him speed.
Run!
Max yelled, his voice cracking with terror. Erin was right behind them, her flashlight beam dancing wildly in the darkness. They didn't look back. They didn't dare to see if the figure was following them. They raced through the asylum, their footsteps echoing in the silent corridors. The figure in the shadows, the whispers, the oppressive silence. It all added to their terror, urging them onward.
They burst out of Ward C and into the main corridor, their chests heaving, their lungs burning. They had to get out, escape the suffocating darkness of Crestwood. But as they ran towards the entrance, they realized with horror that the door was gone. In its place was a solid wall, cold and unyielding. They were trapped. Panic welled up inside Ben. He pounded on the wall, his fists bouncing off the cold stone. "We're locked in," he screamed, his voice echoing in the empty hallway.
Erin, her eyes darting around frantically, spotted a faint light coming from a room at the end of the hallway.
There, she pointed, a glimmer of hope in her voice.
They raced towards the light, their hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and hope. As they got closer, they realized it was coming from a small window high up on the wall. Max grabbed a rusty chain hanging from the wall and gave it a tug. It held firm.
Help me boost Erin up, he gasped. She's the smallest.
Ben and Max joined forces, their fear momentarily forgotten in their desperation to escape. They formed a human pyramid, their bodies straining with the effort. Erin scrambled onto their shoulders, reaching for the window ledge. Her fingers grasped the edge, and with a final burst of energy, she pulled herself up and through the opening.
Hurry, she whispered down urgently. They could hear the fear in her voice.
One by one, Max and then Ben clambered through the window, tumbling onto the cold grass outside. They didn't waste time looking back. They just ran, their legs pumping, their lungs burning, until they were far, far away from Crestwood Asylum. They collapsed on the ground, gasping for breath, their bodies trembling with exhaustion and terror. The moon, hidden behind a cloud, offered no comfort. The wind howled around them, carrying the distant sound of a scream.
Did you see its eyes? Ben whispered, his voice shaking. They were so red.
Erin shuddered, pulling her jacket tighter around her. Don't remind me.
Max, trying to regain his composure, stood up and brushed himself off.
Let's just get out of here.
They walked away from the asylum, their pace quick, their eyes darting nervously over their shoulders. Even though they had escaped, the memory of Crestwood, with its whispers and shadows, clung to them like a cold, damp fog. As they walked, Ben couldn't shake the feeling that they hadn't seen the last of whatever haunted the halls of Crestwood Asylum. He had a feeling that the terror was far from over.